Well, this morning we are going to talk about an obsession of ours. You know what an obsession is? The dictionary says that an obsession is an idea or thought that constantly preoccupies or intrudes on a person's mind. So by definition, you are preoccupied with the things that you think about the most. So what are the things that we obsess over today? What is it that we as 21st century Americans spend a lot of time thinking about? Well, I think we could list any number of things that we obsess over, right? Certainly as Americans, we obsess over money. We spend a lot of time thinking about how to get money, how to spend money, how to save money. We dream about winning the lottery and what we would do with that multi-million-dollar prize. Watch TV and movie. As Americans, we're also obsessed with sex. Watch TV shows or movies, and you will see that Americans think about sex a lot. Pornography is one of the biggest industries in the United States today. And we as Americans are also obsessed with work. Even when we are not at work, we think about work. People constantly think about how to solve problems at their job. They think about how to advance their career and about how to make their resume look good. Or maybe we as Americans obsess over politics, right? We watch news and browse the internet to see what is happening in our nation. We track the polls for an upcoming election and all the things that the top pundits are saying. We could probably create what seems like an endless list of things that Americans obsess over. And we would think that the things that I have listed, money, sex, work, politics, those are the top things that we as Americans are obsessed with. But there is one thing that every one of us is obsessed with. You think about it constantly, yet you are so used to thinking about it that you don't even realize that you are thinking about it. Thinking about this thing seems so normal and expected that you don't even recognize that this thing is an obsession of yours. You see, the list of things we mentioned before aren't obsessions for all of us. Not all of us think about money a lot. Not all of us think about sex or about work or about politics. But all of us think about this biggest obsession constantly. There are no exceptions here. There is one obsession that all of us share. Do you know what we are obsessed with? We are all obsessed with time. We are all obsessed with time. Time is something we think about all the time, so to speak. I mean, how often during your day do you ask, what time is it? When you're at work, you ask that question a lot, right? What time is it? How much longer till I get to go home? When you're at home, you think about the question, what time is it? When is my favorite TV show on? How many hours until I have to go back to work? If we're not thinking about minutes, we're thinking about days. How many days until Friday? When will the weekend get here? How can it be Sunday already? Where did my weekend go? And we not only think about days, we think about seasons and years too. How many days until Christmas? How many months or years till I get my driver's license? When will I be able to retire and collect Social Security? We are obsessed with the question, what time is it? Now, do not try to deny this time obsession. I am a pastor. I know more than anyone that people are obsessed with time. Sometimes I think you all forget that you're not watching TV on a Sunday morning. I think sometimes you forget that here in church, as you listen to me, I can also see you, right? And I see what happens when I am still preaching at 12:01, okay? Services are supposed to last an hour. I'm supposed to be done by 12, so you can go get lunch or go get snacks downstairs. And if I don't finish by 12, you'll all start to worm in your seats, right? And it doesn't make a difference how good the sermon is. Both hands hit 12, and you all start to think, you're supposed to be done. Pastor, this is my time now. And I really can't fault you for that, because when I look up from the pulpit and see it's 12:01, I panic, right? I think I have to hurry up. I'm over my allotted time. Sunday mornings prove that time is an obsession for us. And there's another proof of our obsession with time. Think about how many devices you own that display the time, right? It used to be that we just hold time from our clocks and our watches. But now time is displayed everywhere. Our phones tell time, our cars tell time, our ovens tell time, our microwaves tell time. Our TVs tell us the time if we ask them, along with our Blu-ray players. Even our coffee makers display the time. It's getting to the point where every surface in our house tells us what time it is. We have to be aware at every moment what the time is. It is an absolute obsession for those of us here in America. And I think it's particularly true for those of us who live in the Northeast. You know, many of you know that I lived in Indiana for 2 years, and people in Indiana would often ask me what the biggest difference between living in Indiana and New Jersey was. And I would tell people from Indiana that in New Jersey, everyone, well, almost everyone, had a clock in their head. I would say we live in a very crowded place in New Jersey. We're in the most densely populated state in the Union. So we all have one great social obligation. Our obligation is to do what we are going to do quickly and get out of the way, right? And thus here in New Jersey, we have clocks in our heads that yell at us when we're taking too long. In Indiana, people aren't jam-packed together. They think about time, but they don't have the same rush and hurry over every minute like we do. Americans are obsessed with time, and we here in the Northeast are especially obsessed with time. That sort of leads to the question, well, why are we obsessed with time? I mean, we would say, well, just obsession with time, it's just a natural thing. We think every human being is obsessed with time, right? But that's not true. There are plenty of cultures that don't have the same interest in time that we do. Think about many parts of Africa. I've had plenty of missionaries tell me that the people there don't have the same interest in clocks that we do. Meetings don't start at a certain time. Meetings begin when everybody who's supposed to be there shows up. And there's no time limit to an African church's services, right? People expect to be at worship for 3, 4, 5 hours. The obsession with time is pretty unique for us in the West. It's not necessarily a normal thing. So why are we so obsessed with time? Well, I think there are two reasons we're clock conscious. First, we are time conscious because we recognize that time is such a precious commodity, right? There are truths about time that we have to face. Truth one is there's only so much time in our lives. Truth two is we don't know how much time we actually have. You see, time is fleeting and time is scarce. I've heard it said that time is money, but that's not true. Time is far more valuable than money. Now you say that can't be. Money's more valuable than time. Time can't buy you a car. Time can't buy you a house. Time can't buy you a college education. That's true. The buying power of time is limited. But unlike money, when time is lost, you can't get it back. If you live 70 years, you will have 2,207,520,000 seconds in your life, give or take. And once one of those seconds is used, it's gone. It's never coming back. Now, you can lose money. You can drop $20 in the street, and you might think that 20 is gone forever. But the next day, you get an unexpected check for $100 in the mail. Or the next day, you make more money selling something than you imagine getting. When you lose money, you can make up for it. But time can never be recaptured. If I live to 70, I have some 662 million seconds left. If I waste 1,000 of those seconds, I'm down to 661,900,000 seconds. I can never get those seconds back. I can't find them on the street. Someone can't mail them to me. Thus, we obsess over time because it's a precious commodity. And we recognize that time is a source of potential frustration. We realize that time really controls us more than we control time. And so marking and tracking time becomes a way we try to take control of our lives, right? Capturing time on a watch or on a day planner makes us feel like we are ruling over time rather than time is ruling over us. And that's the second reason that we obsess over time. We obsess over time because it gives us a false sense of control. Because if you think about it, time can be a source of frustration in our lives. That's why we track it so assiduously. You know, most of us feel the weight of time every day. We feel like there isn't enough time. Time is just slipping away. It's going way too fast. Clocks and calendars and planners are meant to be the way that we master time, but we never gain control of time. If you've been with us over the last few weeks, then you know that we're in the midst of a sermon series that examines the meaning and purpose of life. We are calling the series Life is Hard and Then You Die, the hope-giving message of Ecclesiastes. As you can tell by the series title, our messages are coming from the book of Ecclesiastes. And Ecclesiastes is a book in the Old Testament part of the Bible. Most of Ecclesiastes was written by Solomon, one of the wisest men who ever lived. And in Ecclesiastes, Solomon gives us an unvarnished view of life. We said that Ecclesiastes is Instagram without the filters. In Ecclesiastes, we are confronted with the true nature of our lives, and the picture isn't pretty. The message of Ecclesiastes was summarized for us in Ecclesiastes 1:2. That verse says, meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless, everything is meaningless. The teacher is Solomon, and he tells us that he examined life and he found everything meaningless, especially life without God. Now, in the first 2 weeks of our series, we saw that the meaningless of life was related to purpose. We saw that we as human beings are wired to have purpose, but our universe doesn't seem to give us purpose. No matter how hard we work, we can't seem to make our life meaningful. In Ecclesiastes 1, Solomon tells us we can't gain an escape from the monotony of life. The same tasks and chores have to be done day after day. Solomon said we can't find satisfaction. We get bored even with the best sensations and pleasures. Solomon said we can't find solutions to our most basic human dilemmas. We have new technology all the time, but that technology can't address the emotional and psychological and relational problems that beset us. And Solomon said most of all, the problem that we can't address is death. We're going to die, and the memory of us is going to die with us. Now, when Solomon talks about the meaninglessness of life, he is talking about the meaninglessness of a life without God. Many people today live as though there is no God. They believe in only what they can taste, touch, or see. They believe there's nothing supernatural or sacred. Solomon says a life lived like that is meaningless. And the meaninglessness isn't just because we can't find purpose without God. The meaninglessness is also because we can't control time. We obsess over time, we clock it, we calendar it, we track it, we mark it, but we can never control it. And so time drives our lives toward the absurd. Solomon addresses time in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. That's where we're going to be today. So open up in your Bibles to Ecclesiastes 3. If you don't have a Bible, you can use the Bible app on your phone, or you can also follow along on the screens alongside me. And we're going to be reading Ecclesiastes 3, 1 through 15. And there we will see what Solomon has to say about time. He says, there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time of peace. What do workers gain from their toil? I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. I know that there's nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it and nothing taken from it. God does it so that people will fear him. Whatever is has already been, and what will be has been before, and God will call the past to account. Now, this is the only sermon that comes with its own soundtrack, right? Because as I read the first 8 verses, many of you were humming along. If you are of a certain age, you know this passage of scripture, even if you've never opened a Bible. In case you're not aware, these opening 8 verses of Ecclesiastes chapter 3 were turned into a song by the folk singer Pete Seeger. That happened in the 1950s. He called his song Turn, Turn, Turn. The song was recorded by several artists and eventually went to number 1 here in the U.S., thanks to a version recorded by the Byrds with a Y in 1965. Now, Seeger's song is almost an exact quotation of Ecclesiastes 3, 1 through 8. The only words that he added were the words turn, 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 and he added the words, I swear it's not too late, after the mention of a time for peace. As far as I know, Turn, Turn, Turn is the only song to hit number 1 with lyrics that were mostly written before Jesus was born. Now, for Seeger, Turn, Turn, Turn was meant to be an anti-war ballad. It was meant to be a call for people to realize the season for peace had come. That's a good goal, to call for peace, but that's not the goal that Solomon had in mind when he penned these words. Solomon's purpose for the song is given in verse 1 before the song starts. Verse 1 says, there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heaven. And so what does Solomon want you to know this morning? He wants you to know that success in life is all about timing. You cannot do whatever you want, whenever you want, and be successful. The key to success is doing things at their God-ordained moment. right? And so in this poem, Solomon lists 14 pairs of activities. And when within each pair, the two that are listed are opposites. Now, we could go through these 14 activities and explain each of them, but that's not really the point. The point is that these 14 pairs are meant to be representative of all of human activity. Right, the first contrast that Solomon makes is between birth and death. In verse 2, there is a time to be born and a time to die. For all of us, birth and death are the parentheses that go around our lives, and the remaining verses are meant to fill in everything that comes in between. Solomon can't list every activity of life, but the things that he does list are meant to be suggestive and representative of all of life. And so Solomon says there is an ordained time for every activity under heaven. And this suggests that the key to success in life is to get your timing right. No, that's not a new idea for us. We understand that doing things in the right season is the key to success. That's why not many of us are planting gardens in December. You could do that if you wanted to. You could plant a garden when you're chopping down your Christmas tree, but winter isn't a great time for things to grow. Now, we plant in the spring because we know that's the time that things will bud and bloom and grow. We have a saying, timing is everything. And so we agree with what Solomon has to say. We know there is an ordained time for every activity under the sun. If you want to be successful, you have to get your timing right. And so we read Ecclesiastes 3, 1 through 8, and we want to hum along. We want to break into that Pete Seeger song. Ecclesiastes 3, 1 through 8 assures us that if we get our timing right, everything will be okay. But unfortunately, the song is not the end of what Solomon says about time here, because the lesson about time is greater than the song. Verses 1 through 8, the key to success is doing everything at the right time. But in verses 9 through 11, Solomon says we all have terrible timing. In verses 9 through 11, Solomon says we don't do a very good job at understanding and knowing the times and the seasons of our lives. Look at verses 9 through 11. They say, what do workers gain from their toil? I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. What does Solomon say here? Well, verse 9, he strikes a familiar theme. Verse 9, he says, we can work like dogs and not have any satisfaction from our effort. In the first two chapters, that was a problem of lacking purpose. But here the frustration is something else. Here the frustration is about time. Verse 10, look at verse 10, speaks about a burden that God has laid on us as humans. It's a burden that makes life absurd or meaningless. And in verse 11, Solomon explains what the burden is. He says, he, God, has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. Now, the first part of verse 11 summarizes the song of verses 2 through 8. The meaning is that God has made everything beautiful in his time. God has ordained times and seasons where things should happen. God controls history and the passage of events. And as humans, we long to know God's timing and his sense of direction. But there's something about each of us that wants to search for that right time and season for things. We do this not only to be successful, because God created us to do that. He made us to want to align our lives with his timing. But verse 11 also says there's a problem. While God has made everything beautiful in its time, while we want to understand God's perfect timing so we can be successful and live our lives with wisdom, we can't do it. Right? Verse 11 says, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. None of us can completely figure out God's timing. And so I think all of us, we can relate to the struggle that Solomon's talking about here. I remember the elders and I experienced this very struggle in 2020. Back in 2020, you might remember we had to cancel church services because of COVID-19 in mid-March. Verse 5 says that there was a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. Well, in mid-March, we decided to refrain from embracing, and we decided to refrain from handshaking, and we decided to refrain from meeting. Until early June, we really had no choice in the matter. Governor Murphy said, no church. Don't leave your house except for emergencies. But in mid-June, we were given options. We were told we could meet outside with an unlimited number of people. We could meet inside if we only had 35 people in the building. And so then the elders and I had to ask, what time is it? Is it time to home a little longer? Is it time to meet outside? Is it time to meet inside? We had to figure out what time it was, and that was difficult to do. I remember we didn't feel too confident about our decisions. We knew that God had his timing, but we didn't know what the timing is. And life, if you think about it, is all about timing. And if you get the timing wrong, life isn't going to go well for you. Now, think about another example from 2020. Think about the poor person who opened a restaurant in February or early March of 2020, right? They had their effort, their life savings, their work, all of these things in, and they hung that "We're open" sign on March 1st, right? And by March 15th, they were hanging the "We're closed" sign, or at least the takeout only sign. All signs said March 2020 was a great time to open a restaurant. People were eating out, they were spending money, they were doing all sorts of things. And then all of a sudden, that all went away. And there's no way anybody could have seen that coming. Nothing like that had ever happened before. Why do we obsess over time? Why do we have clocks everywhere? Why do we keep day planners and schedules? Why do we hang calendars on the wall throughout our house? It's because we know timing is everything, but the problem is we're not very good at timing. Our timing is often so bad. Our coupons are expired. The sale ended yesterday. The store isn't open for another hour. We just got cancer and we were offered a new job. We bought the stock and then the market tanked. Timing is everything, but we have no timing. So the question that Solomon raises for us is, how do we survive in a world where our timing is bad? Lacking timing can make life seem so absurd and capricious. How do we handle life when our timing is bad? That's the message of hope in this passage. Solomon tells us in verses 12 through 15. Look at those verses. In those verses, Solomon writes, I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it and nothing taken from it. God does it so that people will fear him. Whatever is has already been, and whatever will be has been before, and God will call the past into account. In verses 12 through 15, Solomon twice uses the words, I know. Verse 12, he says, I know. Verse 14, he says, I know. Now, Solomon rarely knows anything in the book of Ecclesiastes. He's rarely assured about anything. He thinks that trying to understand life is like trying to catch the wind. The life and its secrets are impossible to grasp. But here, Solomon highlights two things that he knows. And those two things are meant to make up for what we don't know. Solomon's already highlighted what we don't know. We don't know the timing of our world that lays behind our successes or failures. We don't know the right moment to seize the day or surrender the fort, and that can make life frustrating. But Solomon's saying, if you want to be comfortable in time, don't focus on what you don't know. Instead, what you should do is focus on what you do know. And so verses 12 through 13, Solomon tells us the first thing he knows. He writes, I know that there's nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. And so what Solomon say? He says, just because you're uncertain about the timing of life doesn't mean you can't find enjoyment in life. Instead, it means that the enjoyment of life isn't up to us and to our sense of timing. No, enjoyment of life is up to God and his giving. Right? Solomon repeats something that he said last week in chapter 2. He says that enjoyment and satisfaction are a gift from God. The implication here is that those things are gifts that we don't deserve. But God gives us those gifts anyway. And so Solomon wants us to know that the key to life isn't improving our sense of timing. The key to enjoying is receiving God's grace. Even when our timing is bad, even when we are out of season, God can give us satisfaction and enjoyment. Timing can play a role in life, but God's grace trumps a good sense of timing when it comes to enjoying life. Because you see, unlike us, God has an impeccable sense of time. God is never too early, he's never too late. The Apostle Paul actually talked about God's impeccable sense of timing in the New Testament. He wrote this in Galatians 4 through 5. He said, but when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law so that we might receive adoption as sons. Paul's talking about the coming of Jesus, and Paul says Jesus came at just the best possible moment. And through the work that Jesus did, dying on the cross and rising from the dead, we become God's children. We enter into relationship with God. The Father lavishes us with good gifts. We find enjoyment and contentment through Jesus, not because of our good sense of timing, but because of God's good sense of timing. God's grace found in Jesus Christ makes up for our lousy sense of timing. It gives us satisfaction that we can't achieve on our own. And so Solomon knows our poor timing is often overcome through God's well-timed gifts, especially his gift of grace in Jesus. And Solomon also knows that our poor timing should lead us to stand in awe of the one with perfect timing. All right, look at verse 14 back in Ecclesiastes 3 again. Solomon writes, I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it and nothing taken from it. God does it so that people will fear him. Why does God frustrate our sense of timing? So that we will fear him. He does it so that we will reverence him. He does it so that we will look to obey him. When Solomon speaks of fearing God, he's talking about a reverential awe or expect. God reigns so powerfully over time that we should worship him and obey him and recognize his power. We also have a great old hymn of the faith that worships God because of his sense of timing. There's a hymn that we sing a few times during the year called Crown Him with Many Crowns. But there's one verse in that hymn we normally don't sing. And the verse begins this way. It says, crown him the Lord of years, the potentate of time. A potentate is a powerful figure, right? The author of our hymn worships and praises Jesus because he is over all of time. And that recognition leads to worship and submission. Confronted with our own poor timing, we want to focus on our inadequacies. We want to get to be better with time, but that's the wrong response. We need to stand in awe of Jesus as the Lord of time. And so Solomon wants you to know your life is all about timing, but your timing often isn't very good. Your timing can be poor and will frustrate you as you chase success and satisfaction. But in Jesus, God has given you what you cannot find on your own. Your obsession with calendars and planners and time and clocks will never achieve what you can freely achieve through God's grace. Even if you nail the timing and you do great down here, those things will only be temporary. They will not last for all eternity. And so for those who follow Jesus this morning, I have two suggestions. The first is don't forget to enjoy the moment. All right, in verse 13, the ability to enjoy the moment is a gift from God. And so slow down and in gratitude, give thanks to God and enjoy what he has given. One of my favorite times of year is Christmas. I wait for the Advent season to come because I love preaching about Jesus' birth. I love listening to Christmas music about Jesus' coming. But sometimes, like when Christmas comes, I don't enjoy it. Sometimes I feel like the season's going to go too fast and it will be over. And by focusing on the temporary nature of the season, I miss out on enjoying it. Solomon says it's okay to live in the moment. Enjoy the time that God has given you, the gifts that he has given you. Be thankful for the time you have with your grandkids, for the good job that you have. Enjoy the house that you're in or the car that you drive. As Jesus said, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow has enough trouble of its own. We are often so obsessed with the passage of time that we don't enjoy the time that we're in. But when you see time as a gift from God, you're able to enjoy it without too much concern about what comes next. You enjoy the gift that God has given to you in a moment. So one application for today is enjoy the moment. And the second thing is not to assume the future. Solomon says our timing is bad. We don't know what season of life may be there when we flip the calendar. As I thought about Solomon's words, I was reminded of what James says in James 4:13 through 15. He says, now listen, you who say today or tomorrow, and he's writing to Christians, we will go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business and make money, while you do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. Our poor sense of timing should give us humility about tomorrow. And so when it comes to future plans, we should always say, Lord willing. We should always confess that God has control of the future, not us. We're Americans. We're obsessed with time and what time it is, but we're not very good at knowing what time it will be. That's why God gave us the gracious gift of Jesus. Jesus came in the perfect timing so that we could find joy and satisfaction even when our timing is all messed up. And God does indeed make everything beautiful in its time through our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Let's have a word of prayer together.